Situational irony is an event that occurs that directly contradicts the expectations of the audience. In the story The Interlopers by Saki, we are introduced to Ulrich and George, who are enemies. Ulrich and George find each other in the woods and are crushed by a tree. The Interlopers is a good example of situational irony because the reader thinks that George and Ulrich are going to be helped by men, but they sadly are not. Yes, good. Very good. You want to make sure that you capitalize the titles of stories, for sure, and use quotation marks around short stories, so quote unquote the interlopers. Same thing here, right? The only thing that's missing here is that when you say they're crushed by a tree, it makes it sound like they died by being crushed by the tree. And what you want to is specify that they resolve their differences, which is a very significant event in the story. The Interlopers is a good example of situational irony because the reader thinks that George and Ulrich are going to get helped by men, but they're not. Right, your thesis statement, which is this part right here, it needs to have some mention of cooperation, right? Because the idea is that they resolve their differences and they cooperate to survive. But instead of survival, their cooperation ironically brings their death, because if they hadn't, called out in unison for help, the wolves would not have heard them. So it's just kind of funny that way. So your thesis needs to have some mention how we expect their cooperation to lead to their survival, but instead it brings upon them their death. Situational irony occurs in The Interlopers when Ulrich and George are under a tree calling for help after they had made up, but instead of calling help from men, they were greeted by a pack of hungry wolves. Good. You don't need to mention the wolves again because you're about to when you give the quote. So what you're going to want to do is are under the tree calling for help after they had made up. You could just have a period there. Oh, not what I meant to do. Sorry about that. Let's fix what that is. My bad. Bada bing. Okay. This is also a little awkwardly phrased. They're under a tree calling for help after they had made up. You could say when Ulrich and George call for help, maybe, let's see, why don't you just say when Ulrich and George call for help after they had made up, right? Their families will never know that the conflict between them was resolved and the feud will continue. This is true and particularly tragic. What you might do though is families plural is actually L-I-E-S. Yes. This information seems like it's more appropriate for the explanation section that comes after the quote. So just think about that. In the story it says, in the story it says, and I really cannot do that right. In the story it says, who are they? Asked George quickly, straining his eyes to see what the other would gladly not have seen. Wolves. This is an amazing example of situational irony because, right, that's where that needs to go from here. And obviously you've got a third paragraph to write, Parker, so I'll leave you to that. If you finish your draft and want some more comments, let me know. I'm also happy to explain any of the comments that I've said today in this video. And please make sure that you address all of my comments, not just the ones that were written. There were some that I just spoke that you should address as well. They're worth just as much, and you may need to watch the video once or twice more to make sure you address everything. Alright, Parker, looking forward to the rest of the essay.